Hello, hello, hello there. How's everyone doing tonight? Um, I'm Naomi, and this is the Chronic Noob. First of all, I want to make sure you're comfy. My request when I put out that a new chapter of the Chronic Noob is coming out is that everyone brings their jammies. I'm not in my jammies tonight. I don't know why. That was a mistake on my part. But hope you're comfy. Hope you're cozy because we are going to get into it tonight. It's funny because I want you to bring your jammies, but the uh, the title of tonight's chapter is called "Appearance is Everything." Now, I how often do you hear that appearances don't matter? Sure, they don't, but they do. They're actually everything. Appearance is everything. How you appear, how you present yourself, it is everything. And there are different facets to how you present yourself in different circumstances. For instance, in a professional setting, if you want to get a job or a promotion, you present yourself in a certain way. With acquaintances, you present yourself a certain way. You'll be a little more guarded, a little more loose. It's not a professional setting. With friends, you present yourself maybe more authentically, let out your wild side a little bit. We're even going to get into how you present yourself with your family, including parents, siblings, children. Um, and then we're going to take it a little bit deeper and how you present yourself to yourself, and then how you present yourself to your creator and or your conscience. Depending on what you believe, I do believe there's like more of an internal, I guess, conscience that we have, some kind of inner mirror that we have. So I'm going to get into that as well. So, first of all, why does appearance matter? Well, if I go over to, I Googled it. I did some Googling. I cheated. Oh no, sue me. Not only, this is what Google brought up, not only does appearance affect our perception of somebody else, but it also affects our own to a certain extent. Our personality is also, in a way, dictated by our appearance. This is called okay, hold on. It's a word that I don't know how to read. Let's see. Facultative, facultative, kind of like faculty or facilitate, facultative personality calibration. Appearance matters. Now, the first thing that I wanted to bring in was on a professional level. Now, I do want to preface this by saying that I'm not talking about fake appearances, okay? We're going to get into that, but I do want to make sure in the beginning it is clear that I'm not saying that appearance on a fake level is what is everything, because that's not correct. You need to be able to be your authentic self. And I'm going to get into what circumstances to be most authentic in just a little bit. So, earlier today, I attended a webinar. It wasn't about appearance, but it was about storytelling. What does storytelling have to do with appearance? I'll tell you. Storytelling is how you present yourself, any kind of, what is it? Any kind of material you want to present, whether that's yourself, whether that's your resume, whether that's something you're marketing. You need to learn how to tell a story so you can learn how to sell. Now, this webinar was put on by my colleague Jason Todd, and I think he did a great job. And after attending the webinar, I was like, "Hey, do you want to see some of that stuff?" Oh, I might have a 1 second. I might have a. I'm gonna let him take it in just a second, but I wanted to. I think I hear some kids out there, so I don't know if that caught on this stream. I am streaming from home right after bedtime, so there might be some water getting got. But you need to know how to present yourself. And after hearing the webinar that he hosted, I was like, hey, can you share some of that stuff on my podcast tonight? And he's like, sure. So without further ado, this is Jason Todd. He is the idealist behind the group, the community called the Thinker Growth Community. He is a multi-business starter. I wouldn't know how to say that. He has started and owned multiple businesses, and he is a webinar host and a host of 2 podcasts of his own. Here is Jason Todd.
Hey, Naomi. Good to see you.
Hello. Good to see you too. It's been a hot minute. Like what? 10 minutes? 5 minutes? Hold on.
Yeah, well, we got to figure out what the takeaways are for tonight. So I'm curious, you mentioned the webinar from today. What was something that stood out to you about the webinar today?
Something that really stood out to me is when you were talking about you were talking about the importance of how people perceive you and why it's important to be able to tell your story, because how people perceive you is extremely important. As far, I don't remember exactly what it was, but it had to do with people's perception of you and learning how to create a perception that is authentic to you as well as captivating. Does that sound familiar? With what you're talking about. I don't know if you remember
I don't know exactly
subject you were hitting on, but
it was 50 minutes of, I think, some really solid content.
Right.
But I think it reminds me of a saying I have, which is perception is more real than reality. And it doesn't mean that perception is everything, but perception is more real than reality. And that's proven all across social media. I mean, so you see a glimpse of what a person does for a living. You see a glimpse of their relationships or their travels or their lives, and it has nothing to do really with 99% of their existence. And I think one of the things that you're talking about from that storytelling webinar is that people write stories in their minds based on very limited touch points.
Right. Touch points. That's what you were talking about. Like you say certain things around different people, and you leave certain touch points, and that kind of it's either intriguing or put offing. I thought those. I love what you said about that.
I think I said was you're either concentrating value during those interactions, or you're diluting whatever value it is you're trying to put forward. And that I think is important to recognize in terms of storytelling, because if we're going to be selling a product, for instance, we don't want to dilute the message of the product with all sorts of confusion because we're bad communicators, or because we don't know how to communicate. We don't know that the whole goal is to sell this product. So we're saying, hey, well, here's what I had for lunch today, and people are like, I don't care what you had for lunch today. It makes no difference to me.
Everyone cares what I had for lunch today. I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, I think the idea that less is more really is true when it comes to telling stories. You got to know what to say, what not to say, and when to say it to be able to concentrate the value.
Right. What was that? In one of our previous conversations, you mentioned something that someone had said. If I'm going to speak for a few minutes, I need a certain time. If I need to speak for an hour, I need a certain amount of time. Yeah. Do you remember what that quote was and who said it?
I don't remember who said that, but the gist of it is, and I think it's been restated a handful of times through the years. The gist of it is that if you want me to speak for an hour, give me 5 minutes. If you want me to speak for 5 minutes, give me an hour. And that has to do with the concept that figuring out what to say in the least amount of time takes time.
Right. How does that have to do with how does what you say have to do with appearance?
Well, there's two different types of people who are going to work with you. We'll just leave it
Mhm.
at that. So, two different types of people. One are the people who love you, and then the second types of people are the people who are not yet sure they should love you.
Right.
Arguably, there might be a third group of the people who don't love you, but I would just put them in the hey, we're not yet sure that we should love you.
Right.
So the interesting thing is that the people who love you forgive your sins.
Mhm.
Right? They're your close friends who are like, that's just Naomi. That's just Jason. That's just the
I
way we
don't
are.
sin. Are you kidding? What did you just hold on? What are you
Right?
implying?
And then there's the
Yes.
people who are not yet sure they should love you, and those people judge you,
Right. Mhm.
particularly in the marketplace. And
Critiquing.
that's
Yep.
not a bad thing. We are categorization and classification engines first and foremost. Our brains are dealing with so much input at any given time. It quickly classifies and categorizes what to pay attention to and what not to pay attention to.
Mhm.
That's been well documented through the years. And understanding that, we need to understand that when we are going to communicate a message, we want to understand how a brain is going to quickly categorize us or classify us and how we might want to be able to disrupt that so as to be able to get our message across. And like
Right.
we've talked about before, if you've got a message that you think is going to change the world, you need to get really good at sharing that message. And that is a
Yeah.
process of communication. And communication is all about story.
Right. I love that. So how would storytelling and telling your story benefit? How does that connect to appearance, connect to a job interview?
Well, I mean, one of the simplest ways I used to 20 something years ago, was a department supervisor at a
Mhm.
retail company and a massive retail company. And I, I had the home office and computers department. And I would review resumes and applications rather constantly just to
Mhm.
identify potential new employees so that I had a hopper
Right.
full of people who were coming in. And
Right.
it's a bit of a joke, but it's been done. I've seen it before where a person would not fill out the application. They would just kind of fill it out in spotty fashion,
Mhm.
missing complete sections, or they would say,
Oh.
I really have great attention to detail, and yet, attention is spelled wrong or detail is ironically spelled wrong. And and what I would do, I'm not kidding you, I would take those resumes and I would put them aside immediately.
Mhm.
And that's again because I with 200 applicants, the it may be that you are a very nice person. It may be once I come to love you, I will forgive the fact that you don't know how to spell and that you don't
Right.
double check your work. I might. However, you are now in a competition with 200 other applicants and a stack of applications and resumes. And I will 100% go with the person who filled it out correctly, all
Mhm.
of it,
Right.
filled in some details. So the first pass, you're gone if you simply didn't follow instructions. Because in my quick categorization classification engine of a mind, which is the same one we all have,
Hold on, say that slowly.
the quick classification and categorization engine,
Okay.
we classify and we categorize. You'll call it
Ok
judging, but we classify and we categorize.
That was another section you talked about today. Shouldn't you talk normal language? Isn't that something you touched on today, your story time?
I don't know how else to say categorization and
You said
classification.
I call it
I'm
judging.
pretty
Call
sure
it
I did.
judging. We
Said
judge.
I
We
said use
judge.
the 50
There it
cent
is.
word.
Simplify.
Yeah, we do. We
50-cent
judge,
word
and
is
we should.
judging.
We absolutely have to.
We
Everybody's like, "Well, you
judge. We're
shouldn't judge me."
judgy.
That's bullshit. That's nonsense. It's absolute nonsense. Of course you need to judge.
Mhm.
And when it comes to getting a job, the fastest way to judge whether a person's going to complete the work when they get on site is to figure out did they complete the work in the application
Mhm.
process. If they didn't do that, peace out. You got to go someplace else.
Right. How would you change your story? How would you change the story when you are, um, and how you appear to acquaintances? And how would you categorize acquaintances? Do you feel like some acquaintances love you, or do you feel like most acquaintances are the people who don't know whether or not to love you yet?
Acquaintances generally don't have enough touch points to love you.
Gotcha.
I the the think about it, the concentric circles. So if we were following, for instance, uh, a movie star or a musician, popular musician, you've got all these fans who are just like, "Oh my god, this person's great."
Mhm.
Those are the people on the fringes. They've never once had an in-person discussion with that musician.
Mhm.
It's always what they see from the stage and always what they hear from somebody else. They might have a propensity to, "Oh my gosh, I love that person. I love that musician."
Mhm.
A little bit further in, you might have an acquaintance where that musician has some interactions. You meet at a Super Bowl party. You know, I know you. You are an acquaintance. Though that interaction where I got to actually talk with you now is providing me more information, which exposes the fact that you were just a person. And then
Right.
I might get even closer to you where now I'm a friend. And then I might be a close friend
So
after that.
how would your appearance change to friends? What do you think people should how do you feel like people should appear to their friends? What layer should they appear at to their friends now? So
I
to
wouldn't put a lot of
acquaintances,
personally, I
somewhat
wouldn't put a
guarded.
lot of effort into it. I'd use the
Why?
24 20 the 20 40 60 rule. When you are 20 years old, you think, "Oh my gosh, all these people they're judging me. They're thinking about me. What are
Mm.
they thinking about me?" Right?
No one's thinking about you.
When
You're not
you're
really in a fishbowl.
wh-
It's perception.
when you're 40, you're
Mhm.
like, "Screw all those people who've been thinking about me." And then when
Mhm.
you're 60, you're like, "Oh, that's right. Nobody was ever thinking about me."
No. Mhm.
So I think that's pretty true. So the idea is, live as though you really don't care,
Right.
because in the end, in the end result, the the people who don't care don't matter, and the people who matter don't care.
Right. Oh, I
That is
love
a
that.
pretty cool. That's a pretty good rule of friendship
Yeah. Yeah. I
because they know you best. And if they don't, and
yes.
if at that point in time they really don't know you, and they really are, and they're really judging you, perhaps to the point of, there's a separation of relationship, and they're not going to go further to to deal with it. Well, how good of a friend were they to begin with, or how good of a
Right.
friend were you? That's the other way to
And
look at it.
that's when oh gosh, don't go there. I I've had this experience recently where I thought someone was my friend, so I kind of let down some walls, and I was like, "Oh, is this okay? Is this okay?" Like, I was dealing with some stuff, and I was like, "Oh, I don't know," and I had this group of friends that I would share some things with, and they're like, "Oh, yeah, we got you," you know? So I thought my appearance to them could be less filtered, right? Well, I ended up getting a message from one of these friends where apparently I was making the entire group miserable, and I had no idea. Um, I mean, what had been communicated to me is that I wasn't, so I felt like there was deception there. But also, I was like, "Hey, I considered them friends, but maybe they hadn't considered me a friend. Maybe I was just an acquaintance." And the polite thing to do with an acquaintance, the appearance you want to have with an acquaintance, is keeping the peace. You know that not necessarily affection, but perhaps what's it called, indifference, but like positive indifference, if that makes sense. So the message in and of itself didn't feel very kind, and it felt like I had been, deceived, in who I could rely on as a friend. It taught me that I need to be more cautious and learn who my friends are before I appear in that kind of, uh, vulnerable state, I guess. Um, and but also it kind of I think there's this huge part where we need to show up, and how we appear needs to it has to do with um, when it comes to people that we are interested in being our friends and going from that acquaintance to friend group. we need to be okay with appearing authentically, and we need to be okay with them seeing the invitation to be a friend and opting out into the acquaintance zone. That has to
Mhm.
be something that there has to be that, oh, okay, you don't want to be my friend? Cool. Like there has to be that level of acceptance, because when it comes to friends, true friends, this is where appearance, if someone is acting as though your appearance is offensive, that is not someone you can ever consider a friend. Not that just that you have, like, when it comes to appearance is everything. And it tells you a lot of your relationship with someone is how you can appear to someone and they still 100% accept you. And I
So I
think that
think I'm when I'd like to dig into this idea of appearance is everything. So what do
right.
you mean by the word appearance?
I mean, appearance. So there's different aspects of appearance, right? So there's physical appearance, how you present yourself, grooming, well dressed, looking professional, not looking professional. But I think appearance too is how you project yourself. So appearance is how you present yourself in your words, in your actions. It's the impression that you give off, the overall impression you give off. Um, And so when I say appearance is everything, and you need to change your appearance, the impression you give off in different circumstances. And when you get down to the layer of friendship, you have to be able to not give a flying fuck about appearances. And you need to find the people who do not give a flying fuck about your appearance. They love you, accept you, and embrace you for everything that you are and everything that you aren't. And beyond that, like, friends I feel like are the closest, because family can sometimes, that can get strained. It can get strained, and blood means nothing. Blood absolutely means nothing. Yes, you have more loyalty to your, like, maybe family of origin and stuff like that. But when it comes to true authentic friends, that inner circle, it's the people who, with your appearance and with your impression, it doesn't matter how you show up, they will embrace you 100%. So, like, going into, like, the next appearance would be for family, right? How you appear to parents, you want to make sure that you are being respectful to them when you're in their household, and make sure that, like, and to a degree too, because I mean, sometimes people grow up in abusive households, and I mean, obviously you still respect them in their home, but you also need to make sure there's boundaries and you're keeping yourself safe. They should be keeping you safe. So with parents, they're teaching you, they're keeping you safe, they're housing you. You appear with respect. You want to be your authentic self, but you appear with respect. That's your appearance. With siblings, you're more laid back a little. You can let loose a little bit, have some healthy sibling rivalries, they'll toughen you up and stuff. With your children, your appearance needs to be, this one's fun. Okay, this one's fun because they always tell you how to be boundaried. This whole movement about being boundaried and guarding yourself and having all these healthy boundaries. Don't let people walk on you. When you're a parent, um, none of those boundaries are applicable. You have to allow safe space for your children to let loose. You have to be that safe space for them. So they can be screaming at you, telling you you're ugly as you're getting ready to go somewhere, telling you they hate you. And, oh, it's okay that you think that. You need to respond with kindness. And that goes against everything else we learn about boundaries. So boundaries kind of go out the window with kids. Obviously, you need to teach them that's not appropriate. I actually had a situation where my 7-year-old was literally calling me ugly to my face. He was saying, I have a mole in my eyebrow. If you're not watching this, I have a mole in one of my eyebrows. And I was getting ready for something, and he was like, "I like how you're decorating your eyes. I like your eyebrows, except for that one spot in that one. You need to get rid of that because that is not very beautiful. You never need to cover that. That's not very beautiful." And I was like, "I think it's beautiful. It's the way God made me." And he was like, "No, it's not very. You need to get rid of it. You need to get it. You need to go to the doctor and get it out because it's not very beautiful." And he kind of pushed it, and I made sure I held my ground on, like, I'm beautiful exactly the way that God made me. You don't have to like what I look like, but that doesn't mean I'm not beautiful. I don't need decorations on my face to make me beautiful. And he kept pushing it, and then he went on to say, my husband was out getting gas in my car because I was about to go somewhere, and he's like, "I wish Dad was here, and you were putting on your makeup in the car because I want Dad to be here instead of you." And he was picking at me, and I was like, "Okay, I think you're saying these things to not be kind. I know you're not feeling very good this morning, but it's time for you to go in your room now." Because what you're saying isn't very kind. Well, no, I told him to stop first. I was like, "Okay, what you're saying is actually not very kind. You're welcome to have your opinions, but it's not very kind. It's not kind to tell people they don't look good. It's not kind to tell people that you wish that someone else was there instead of them. It's not kind. So you need to stop now." And he kept pushing it, and I was like, "Okay, it's time to go to your room." Um, Now, if this was an acquaintance who was saying these things, that conversation would have gone very differently. Who are you to tell me your opinion of my appearance? Do you think I give a flying crap? Are you serious? Like, that would have been a very different conversation because that's blatant disrespect. But as a 7-year-old, he doesn't understand that. So it's my job to teach him what dialogue to have against other people who may have some negative opinions about his appearance. So with kids, you have to, when it comes to boundaries, how you appear to children needs to be more forgiving, I guess, more laid back, more safe. I don't know than how you would appear to like an acquaintance or something. Now, these last two I want to touch on pretty quickly. Appearance to yourself. How do you feel like appearance to yourself? What do you feel like that means when I say that? What does that sound like to you?
The buzzword language comes to my mind, which would be something akin to self-talk. How do
Mm,
you represent yourself? Because when I think of the word appearance in the context that you're using it, I think
mhm.
of how you show up to
Right,
circumstances,
right.
which is not the not solely the physical appearance.
Mhm,
It is the mental, emotional, physical, spiritual, your entire being.
mhm,
That is how you choose to show up to a circumstance. So if I, for instance, like you talked about showing up to your, family's house or something. If I show up to my parents' house, I show up in a certain way and I
right.
have freedom. I have freedom to show up in a certain way there that I do not have if I went to a business event, because nobody's going to put up with me going over to the thermostat in a business event and going, "It is too hot in here. I'm going to turn the thermostat down," or "I'm going to open the window now," or the door because it's too hot in here. My
Mhm,
parents will. That's the relationship I have with them. But it would be completely inappropriate, wildly inappropriate for me to even make mention of it, perhaps at a business event, because it doesn't matter in that circumstance. And I've
mhm.
not been given authority or responsibility or the boundaries to be able to do anything about it.
Right.
So I instead would show up in a certain way at a business event that
Mhm,
uh, a bit more edited, right, than showing up
right.
at my parents' house. So when I show up internally, though, to each of those places, it begins in me, and that's true of all of us. And I think,
Right.
as you're walking yourself through your various life events, including children and whatnot,
Mm,
one of the keys, I think, to keep in mind is that your interactions with the people around you are what are based on what is happening in them. It's how
mhm.
they're showing up. 80% of what you're going to experience, and this is a big broad brush, right? But if we
Right.
use the 80-20 rule, which happens to hold true in a lot of different circumstances, in my interpersonal interactions, 80% of what's going to happen is is uh is me showing up how I'm perceiving that. 20% is what the other person's doing or saying.
Right.
80% of it's what the story that I brought into the situation, and vice versa.
Mhm.
And so as we age, and this actually is an age and experience thing, I think.
Mhm.
As we age, a lot of the things that I worried about as a 20-something year old, I don't worry about anymore. I don't care, because I know it doesn't matter, because I know it's transient in nature, and I know it's going to change. So it really doesn't matter how the way certain things are um, emphasized or prioritized.
Right.
Because I know for myself, I emphasized and prioritized certain things and worried about certain things. I
Yeah.
showed up in a certain way when I was
Mhm.
when I was a younger person that I just wouldn't do anymore. I went to a church at
Right.
one point in time who, we had a discussion. It was an intense discussion, deep discussion whether we should wear suits and ties as leadership on the stage at church. And we decided we should wear suits and ties.
Mhm.
Well, that's primarily a cultural thing, because suits and ties weren't invented 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago. It
Right.
was something different then. And
Right.
now if somebody showed up in a suit and tie in a lot of churches, you'd be like, you feeling all right? Is that okay? I know it's like 90 degrees outside. You fine?
Right.
So
But maybe they wanted to show up that way for God,
well, we wanted to show, actually no, we didn't want to show that. We wanted to show up that way to maintain the atmosphere of respect. How I
Mm.
dressed somehow equated to respect.
Right.
That was the thing.
Right.
Is it wrong? No,
No.
absolutely not. Does it matter? No, not in the grand scheme of things. It doesn't matter at all. Church isn't about how you dress,
Mhm.
but it mattered in that circumstance. Or,
Right.
I owned a business, and we decided that we would wear sport coats and a tie, and in fact gave people a stipend to get custom made dress shirts every year. And
That's cool.
yeah, for sure. And a benefit of that was that, well, if we told you that you needed to dress that way, then we would also pay for your dry cleaning. So we had dry cleaning pickup and drop off services every
Wow.
week.
That's
Kind of a neat
cool.
idea, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
neat idea.
I love that.
Did it matter for the to maintain the atmosphere? It
No.
mattered. I mean, it was the atmosphere.
It
Does it
did?
matter?
Okay.
I mean, it maintained a certain atmosphere. Does it matter
Yeah, that makes
globally,
sense.
or does that matter
Broader
to
sense.
getting the particular job done that we needed to get done? No. In fact,
Mm.
sometimes it got in the way. But it it's what we decided.
Wait, it got in the way sometimes and you still did it? Why?
Well, sometimes we had to ship products or get returns or something like that, and people are standing around in dress shirts,
Mm.
and so over a period of time that changed. We relaxed the policy and changed the policy, and
Mm.
that um it didn't really matter in the grand scheme of things, but it held our particular the way that we wanted to construct the circumstances, the feeling that we wanted to have, how we wanted people to show up. It was no different than wearing a uniform at a retail, at a retail place. Come to the office and wear a uniform that makes you look like you're not a hack. Okay,
Right.
fine. I'm a programmer. I cannot tell you how many hours I have programmed sitting in my basement with a hoodie on, looking like Darth Vader in the dark, because that's just what I want to do. However, if you put me
Yeah.
on stage and I showed up like that, I'd have to have
You get booed
I'd
off
have
the
to have an
stage.
I'd have to have an explanation for a lot of people.
Yeah.
That's all.
What are you
Now,
doing?
that the thing
Yeah.
is, though, it's like, well, I've got a resume that could easily explain that I, actually know what I'm talking about, but I will be
Right.
immediately judged by a lot of people. And
Right.
that might be okay. again, most of the stuff that we deal with, we tend to overthink. But the idea that
I never
it
overthink.
yeah, but we don't want to too quickly discount the idea that perception is more real than reality.
Right.
That is key.
So how does
And if people come in with an expectation, you might as well meet that expectation or have a really good reason for not meeting the
right,
expectation, because the
right.
difference between expectation and reality is disappointment.
Hmm.
So if you went to a job interview, I've here's a funny, for instance. There's a guy who he was he was a neighbor of mine at one point in time, and I caught him outside, and he was dressed in probably a tuxedo, um, and he he looked overdressed for whatever he was doing. And I asked him, "What are you doing?" He's like, "Oh, I got a job interview." It's like, "For what?" He was gonna be gonna get a job as a manager of McDonald's. And I was like, okay. I did not mention it to him that, wow, a tuxedo is completely unnecessary for a manager of McDonald's, because it didn't matter.
Right.
Why?
How do you
Why would it
feel?
matter? He wanted to go put himself out there in such a way that he just wanted to show up, to dress to the nines. All
Right.
right, cool. Number one, I have no influence at all in this circumstance. And even if I did, it would just come in real sideways if I said anything to begin with.
Right. It's like that what I was talking about, kid versus acquaintance.
Yeah. And you know what? It's
Gotta
much
choose
better
your
than
words.
showing up in shorts and a t-shirt.
Hmm. That's true. You'd rather be overdressed for the job than underdressed. One looks
Sure.
over responsible like an overachiever, and the other looks irresponsible.
Yeah. I would assume, I would hope that he has some explanation for it. The explanation is, hey, I cared about getting this job. All right, fine. We're going to throw you in a McDonald's uniform anyhow. So
Right.
doesn't
How
matter.
does
It
that
really doesn't matter.
so back to my original question. What do you
Mhm.
think of when you think of appearance with self? You mentioned how you show up. How do you feel like it's important to show up for yourself? That voice in your head. What do you think I mean by appearance in that?
I think words have power. This is where I would head with it. I would say that words have power.
Mhm.
And in my experience, no one is harder on us than our own
Mm.
negative self-talk. So if you want to, here, I was doing TikToks last year,
Right.
and I probably have done some TikToks in the meantime too. But
Mhm.
I was doing some TikToks last year, and out of the blue, at the end of one of my TikToks, I ended it by saying, "Be your best friend today,"
Ah.
and it had just escaped my mouth before I even realized what I said. And so I did a follow-up to that, and I said, "You know what? The other day I was just finishing my TikTok, and I said, 'Hey, be your best friend today.'
Mhm.
And I want to unpack that for you." And I thought, what would it be like if today you treated yourself as though you were your best friend?
Can you imagine? Can you imagine how much projection there wouldn't be if people could just be nice to themselves? Like, can you imagine? Because I mean, that saying, like when people are mean to you, it has a lot more to do with them than it has to do with you.
Yeah.
Can you imagine if people were their own best friend, what that would do to how they interact with other people and how many hurt feelings could be completely avoided if we could just show up and give ourselves our best appearance, completely authentic, completely kind, completely respectful to ourselves.
Well,
World peace would happen overnight.
the thing that you talk about there is that, ever people's responses or the way they act has to do with what's in them.
Mhm,
The same is true of ourselves, right? So
mhm.
we say that about other people, but the exact same thing is true of us. So if we are treating ourselves poorly, what does that say about what's happening in us?
Right.
And there is
That
this idea there is a level of narcissism that I think can enter into our existence where we talk about
Mhm.
self-love, 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 self-love. And
Right.
that's a bit of nonsense. Part of the idea is the the best way to love yourself is to love somebody else. because if we keep on focusing inward, we don't have any context for our external impact.
Right. We don't
If
have
we
that.
love
Right.
others, right? If we love others, and it leads to anxiety and depression, all sorts of things, which is
Mm-hmm.
kind of interesting, right? The more
Mm-hmm.
time we have to think about ourselves, the worse off we tend to be.
Mm-hmm.
If we distract ourselves in a positive way from thinking about me all the time and just go, oh, let me see who I can take care of out there, all of a sudden we actually feel a reciprocal effort and find out, oh, wait a second, I am lovable because I loved somebody else and they loved me back. That's the best way to figure out that you're lovable. Allow somebody to love you.
Right.
It
Easier
doesn't
said
mean
than done.
anything if we love ourselves. The you talk about spirituality. It's well,
Right.
okay. So there is a great principle that, when we are unlovable, we need love the most. That is totally true. It
Mm.
does not work the other way, though, where we're just like, I am so unlovable, I'm going to talk myself into being lovable. No, the answer is, I'm so unlovable, and what I really need is somebody to show me love. And then we go,
I
oh, gotcha. I feel like now all of a sudden it's like, oh, all right,
I
I'm
might
okay.
I might have to disagree with you a little bit on that one.
Go ahead.
Um, and that the reason being is I think when we find ourselves most unlovable, I think that's when we need to get in touch with our creator and our conscience. Because in my experience, when we're finding ourselves unlovable, it's because we're not appearing as our authentic self to our creator or our conscience. There's something in the way. There's something in the way of that. And I do think that getting out and serving is a great way to help us have that humility to be able to align ourselves again with our conscience, with our creator. Um, but I think, well, I guess so too. Kind of going along with what you're saying, allowing someone to love us. Oftentimes, that's my personal opinion, God's love and Him showing us that we are lovable, and that can be through other people. That can also be through prayer, though, and that's the last part of appearance is the last who do I appear to is our creator or our deity slash our conscience, and that is I'm yes, we show up for ourselves a certain way, right? We have this persona that we show up to ourselves, the person we look at in the mirror. But when it comes to those gut feelings that drive, there's something in us that's not necessarily us. It's like a higher power or an inner conscience, whether you're religious or whether it's a soul, something, the spirit, the soul, your creator, the Holy Ghost, whatever your affiliation. I feel like there's that thing in us that we need to it knows us better than we know ourselves. God knows us better than we know ourselves. And how are we appearing to Him? And can we actually see how we appear to Him?
I think there are two things in that, and
Mhm,
number one is I think all of us, uh, or the vast majority of us, let's say,
mhm,
have an innate desire to be seen and accepted. And that's what I talk about. If you're going to show up to yourself, if you're going to show up, let's say, to your creator,
mhm.
I'm unlovable. And you see that, and I still am accepted. Through that, I can do all sorts of things. However, if I show up and say, no problems here, I love myself. All my faults and my jackassery and the fact that people don't like me, that's just on them because I'm being my authentic self. Nope, that's
Right,
narcissism, and
right.
no one wants you around.
Mhm.
You have almost no hope of changing that if that's the way you show up to your life. Instead, if you show up, you go like, you know what, I'm doing some things really great, and there's some things I'm just really bad at.
Humility. Right.
Can you help me? Can you change this? Can we work on this together? That's the
Mhm.
greatest way to feel empowered. Or, hey, would you accept my help? I can help you in a certain way. Uh, and all of a sudden, it's like, oh, I am accepted.
Mhm.
And we start to know each other and we feel that acceptance. So I think everybody has this innate desire to be seen and accepted. We do it interpersonally, and I think we also do it with ourselves spiritually. And you can say it's conscience or whatever, or
Mhm.
creator. The That is a fundamental concept for all of us, to be seen
Right.
and accepted.
Right.
The best way, and it does, and so here's wrapping that all that in.
Mhm.
There might be things that now I am seen for and I am accepted, but are not relevant to the situation. So this idea that we should be ourselves in all our quote unquote ourselves in all situations, part of yourself is the fact that you are edited. And that's a good
Yes.
quality.
It's there's a difference between I want to backtrack to that too. Like when you're being with your friends, it doesn't mean disrespecting people. And I think
Right.
you want to make sure that yeah, you want to make sure that you're your authentic self. But if you're disrespecting someone, if you're constantly blowing them off, if you're
Yeah.
constantly berating them for their beliefs or the way they talk or whatever it is, that's not friendship. That's just
No.
being an asshole. That's
And this
all that
idea
is.
and the idea of boundaries, that's a new thing. It's and be ourselves, because we have so
Mhm.
much time on our hands to be able to focus on ourselves. We have it really good in
Right.
our Western culture, actually.
Right.
We have so much time to be able to focus on ourselves that we're creating little worlds of narcissism. And so we develop these boundaries, and we talk about healthy boundaries, but we're developing our boundaries as nitpicky little things rather than principled things. There are principles. So, for
Right.
instance, you might say things that don't make any sense because you don't have the
Mhm.
words for it, you know. And to
Right.
me, I go, "Oh, well, I have the word for that." So, but who cares? Because the principle is that all of what let's say what you're learning is going to change. All right, that's fine. There's all sorts of things I've had to work through in my life, and it didn't come across well the first time. And the people who nitpicked me and beat me down for that, they're not with me anymore. And the people who were like, "Hey, you know what? That was kind of a tough time, wasn't it? You're kind of working your way through that kind of stuff, weren't you?" It's like, yeah, the principle was you saw me headed in the right direction. You
Mhm.
saw me working through my stuff. And so you forgave all of the, back to this idea that people who love you forgive you. You forgave all these little tiny things because you're not, the people who are working through their stuff, the vast majority of people are not trying to be offensive. They're not trying
Right.
to
Right.
say something to get under your skin. They are acting out of their own internal angst
Or
and projecting
insecurities.
that into the situation.
Mhm.
And so the boundaries that we develop are boundaries of principles. So, I mean, should you swear? Should you not swear? I don't know. Figure it out. If you don't want me to swear, that's fine. Tell me, but I'm not trying to be offensive to you.
Right.
If I do, and I know certain circumstances, it would be highly offensive, and so I won't, because I have
Right.
the freedom to not do that. And so I will
Mhm.
show up in a situation that respects the principles for that group of people. I won't get up on stage and deliver a keynote and burp in the middle of it. However, if I'm sitting on the couch with my daughter eating and watching a show, a burp might escape
Mhm.
and we might chuckle about it. Highly inappropriate for a keynote situation.
Right.
But
I
do
mean,
I burp? Yeah. Do people ever think about it outside of me sitting at my own house? Probably not. It never would cross a person's mind. Oh my God, Jason's burps.
mhm. I
Because I don't do it.
right.
That's where I think the boundaried principles, looking to all the other stuff in the middle, it just washes out. And it won't matter a decade or 20 years from now. It really won't. It's all nonsense anyhow.
Right. Going back to like swearing or not swearing in front of people, I think there's also something to be said for there I I go back and forth on that one. I like my swear words. I love Jesus and I love my swear words. I like to season my language with some spice. I that's just how that's how I show up authentically.
Mhm.
That's just how I show up authentically. Now, I know there are people who are more sensitive to it, so I will edit around them because I respect them. But then there are people who there's a difference between being sensitive to it and judging someone for doing it. And if it's someone who's going to judge me or think I'm less of a person for doing it, I don't give a flying fuck what that person thinks of me. And I will use all the swear words that I want to around them 100%. And you know what? If that means they don't want to be around me as much, good riddance. Like, that's just
See, and I
fine,
won't.
fine,
I'll be like, oh, it really matters to them, so
fine.
I'm just going to tone it down a little bit because their
If it
judgment also doesn't mean anything to me. I don't have to fight with their judgment. That judgment is all about their own internal story.
Right. I guess that's fair. I guess that's fair. It's more around the people, like, if I can tell they're judgy about it, but like they would justify. I grew up in a religious culture where there's a lot of hypocrisy, I guess. I mean, a lot of religious culture has that, right? Where swearing
A lot
is
of people
bad.
have hypocrisy. It has nothing to do
Right.
with religion.
Right. The hypocrisy that I'm talking about specifically is religious. Like, it's bad to
Yeah,
swear.
I understand.
But if you tell somebody that if you vilify somebody and if you have enough gossip to back it up and you smear campaign them, oh, well, that's perfectly okay because
Right.
clearly you hurt them. And like, you can completely ostracize them
Right.
from a whole
Or,
group of people.
or
That's okay.
it's
Swearing,
kind of
oh, condemnation.
it's kind of the joke of Jeffrey. Hold on, my dog is eating some Jeffrey.
It's a joke of Jeffrey.
Uh,
Jeffrey is the joke.
he doesn't even exist. He's all in my head. No, but it's kind of like the joke where it's like, hey, did you hear about Susan? Oh my God, Susan's doing this and Susan's doing that. Susan, oh my God, we should pray for her. I'm just telling you that so you can pray, so you know how to pray
Right.
for her.
Right. What
It's like, I don't think Susan actually wants to talk about those things.
that's the gossip I'm talking
And
about.
I actually don't think God needs you to be super
Oh,
specific because I'm pretty
yeah,
sure he
he
already knows.
doesn't he knows what people are going through. He doesn't need you to share and air everybody's dirty laundry. Like, are you kidding me? You don't
Right? It's
I'm
not
so
like
concerned for them. I
God's
need
like,
everyone to pray for
you
them, so it
left off
justifies
you
me
left off that thing.
gossiping and sharing everything about them.
It's a good thing you told me. It's it's a good thing you told me about Susan, Naomi, because God's like, I didn't even know it's happening.
Right? It's like, why do people have to know dirty the gossip? Oh, the gossip.
Well,
So
getting it back
those
on
kind of
track.
people, yeah, those
Yeah.
kind the with swearing, if I can tell that it's somebody who would justify gossip or would justify smear campaigning in any stretch of the imagination, that's what I mean by I will swear my heart out around them. I'm like, you know what?
Well,
Oh,
you're just doing that
does that condemn me
back to
to hell? Oh,
back to
I'll
the
see
idea
you
of principles,
there.
though.
I'll see you there.
You're just trying to push the principle at that point. That's your boundary. Your boundary is like, wait a second, I'm going to push back against your principles. That's all. You're trying to teach a lesson. And then
Yeah.
you really
It's
have to
standing
make a
up for myself.
determination.
It's like,
Is it worth teaching that lesson or is it not? I don't know. And that has to be
it's
done
worth holding my
circumstantially.
ground. Yeah, exactly.
Sure.
Exactly. So yeah, yes, I 100% agree. It does need to be done circumstantially because
Yeah.
there are some people where it's like they would be judgy, but it's you don't think they've had enough experience to think other. Well, I guess it's all relative. That's all relative.
Right.
I guess it just depends on whether or not I respect the person or not enough to
Yeah.
not swear in front of them. Oh,
Well,
I guess it comes
for
down to that,
me,
huh?
for me, one of my things is I will stop communicating at some point in time with
Hmm,
people. If I really don't care anymore, I just like I'll stop
right.
communicating. If I think I really cannot make an impact anymore, and this is really important, if you have 100% of your capacity to do something today,
Mhm.
100% of your energy, don't waste it in areas that don't matter. And you know what doesn't matter? A person who does not care. If they don't
Yeah.
care to do anything with it, whatever gold you think you're dropping, or whatever energy you have, go spend the energy someplace else. You could spend it on
Mhm.
yourself. You could spend it on somebody who does care.
Mhm.
Lots of ways to spend your energy, and that I think is a wisdom, perhaps a wisdom thing. Perhaps in wisdom, perhaps comes from age and evaluated experience. I hope, um, and I think the hunger for working these things out is greater when you're younger and a little bit less when you're older, because it's just like, I don't know, it'll wash
Right.
out.
Right.
I'm not going to deal. What I'm not going to do is I'm not going to deal with it today because
Right.
it don't
I
matter.
just don't want to interact. I don't want to interact. I don't want to engage. It's just not worth it.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
So bringing it back to who do I appear to? I think we've covered all of who we appear to, but I think what I want to bring it home with is how you appear to and how you show up for yourself. And I want to bring it back to what you said is be your best friend today. I love that. And I want that to be a huge takeaway from this. You need to be your best friend. You need to be kind to yourself. Get to know yourself. A friend would get to know you. You need to get to know yourself like you would get to know a friend. And as you get to know yourself, you become more aware of how to appear in different circumstances, whether it's an impression you want to make on an acquaintance who could become a business partner, who could become an employer, who could become a friend, a potential significant other. Impressions matter, appearances matter. When you know yourself, you know how to show up, you know how to appear to facilitate the goals that you have. And how you appear, it's not just external, it's going to be internal. It's how you show up, it's how you follow through. So be your best friend today. Get to know yourself. Get to know how best to appear in different circumstances. Was there anything else you wanted to add before
Yeah, I think
I send us out?
yeah, yeah, I think of the idea of a best friend. A best friend, like I love what you talk about. A best friend knows you, sees you,
Mm-hmm.
accepts you,
Yep.
forgives you, but also knows when to call you out on your
Mm-hmm.
nonsense. That
Yep.
I think is hugely important. If we're unwilling to call ourselves out on our nonsense, we don't show up. We have no hope of showing up as our best self
Right.
because
Right.
we allow things to persist that we know don't belong anymore. And it
Mm-hmm.
could be that it's a old coping pattern, a coping habit that really doesn't, belong. It's not serving us well, or it could be something that we need to add into our lives, or something that
Mm-hmm.
we need to delete, and we are not even. And I think this is really important. Actually, we're not even aware of that. So we have to be able to show up to external friendships as well, and
Right.
allow somebody else to speak into our lives, but be careful
That
about who those
space.
people are.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I love that.
And my best example, my best recommendation for that is don't accept advice from somebody you don't want to be like.
Hmm. If you don't want to be like them, don't
Everybody's
accept
got
their
an
advice
opinion.
and you can go.
Opinions are
Yep.
like buttholes. Most of them, everybody's got one, and most of them stink.
Yep. Yes. Yes. That's the way to put it. With that.
Hey, you wanted people to be casual.
Right.
Yeah. See, that's not something I would say to the Better Business Bureau, for instance. I gave a
Why?
keynote to the Better Business Bureau, but hey, you know what?
Why not? It would catch them off guard. It's a good tagline. It's a great tagline. Get attention. That's everything, right? Appearance is everything. Get attention. Peacocking. Have you never heard of peacocking? You've seen that, right? The peacocking. You kind of just.
No.
Are you familiar with
Well,
peacocking?
good topic, Naomi. Thank you for having me.
Wait, are you aware of what peacocking is?
I don't know. Maybe.
Okay, peacocking is like when you go over the top in your appearance to get attention.
Okay. Yeah, right. Yeah.
Okay, so that's what I
I'm
was
familiar
referring to.
with that
Anyway,
for sure.
thank you so much for joining us tonight, Jason, and for your input and for your stories. And be sure to check out his podcast, not the Chronic Noob. This is the Chronic Noob, Coffee with Humans, as well as What Works. He's got 2 podcasts, What Works and Coffee with Humans. And if you like what you learned here, we are both faculty members in the Thinker Growth community. We do 2 networking events every week. Our next one will be next Tuesday at lunchtime. It will be 11:30 Central, so 12:30 Eastern, 11:30 Central, Tuesday. Be sure to join us, and we'll see you there. All right.
Thanks, Naomi.
Good night, everyone. Thank you so much, Jason. Bye. Ooh.